Consent is a very important topic when the subject comes up in my general education courses about sexual assault and domestic violence. What we learn together is without enthusiastic, continual, ongoing consent, it's rape. The idea of consent is also important when doing research. If university researchers are conducting research that involves human subjects, they have to submit their research proposals to a standing committee called Human Subjects Review. That committee decides if the research is ethical, and it also insists that a waiver is signed by all the research subjects. The waiver states that the human subjects understand exactly what the research is about in advance, and it also gives them the option to withdraw their consent at any time, for any reason, or for no reason at all. With regard to sexual relations, that's also true. If consent is withdrawn at any time, for any reason, or for no reason, anything that happens after that is rape. When it comes to this failed experiment called life, consent is also a big deal. If life has an author or a lead researcher, none of us probably remember giving that researcher our consent to join in this interesting experiment we call life. Caitlin Johnstone's expression here, I think, involves all three aspects of consent: the sexual aspect, the human aspect, and the metaphysical aspect. And I personally relate to all three of them. Consent Rescinded by Caitlin Johnstone. This sacred pause, this sacred space has opened up between me and my agreements. Agreements I made when I was too young to consent. When I agreed that war is normal. I agreed that greed is good. I agreed some must die. I agreed that poverty is unavoidable. I agreed that everyone must work. I agreed that you can lie to me for my own good. I agreed that I was born bad and only punishment by cruel men could make me good. I agreed that in order to learn, I needed to be abused. I agreed that only things that make money were things worth creating. I agreed that peace was only to be found in death. I agreed that home was only to be found in death. I agreed that release from suffering was only to be found in death. I agreed that rest was only to be found in death. I agreed that heaven was only to be found in death. I agreed that bliss was only to be found in death. I agreed not to assert my right to have any of these things until I died. I agreed that I did not have a right to a home. I agreed that I did not have a right to food. I agreed that I did not have a right to help. I agreed that I did not have a right to happiness. I agreed to give you my body. I agreed to have and to hold. I agreed to pretend you won. I agreed to let it slide. I agreed to keep quiet. I agreed to lie that I was fine. I agreed to lie to myself that I was fine. I agreed that your pleasure was more important than mine. I agreed to feel guilty for what you did to me. I agreed to hate my body. I agreed to punish my body. I agreed to hate myself. I agreed to punish myself. I agreed to make your dreams my priority. I agreed to put mine aside. I agreed to obey the rules even when the rules were batshit crazy. I agreed to abide by the law even when the law was wrong. I agreed to feeling hopeless instead of feeling anger. I agreed to skipping straight to disappointment without ever stopping to try. I agreed to keeping the peace instead of stopping the war. I agreed to pretend your taunts made me stronger even while they made me weaker. I agreed to have your babies even when I did not feel safe enough to do so. I agreed to provide for your babies while pretending you were their provider. I agreed to protect your babies from you while pretending you were their protector. I agreed to weave fairy tales of how great you are while cleaning up the damage you wrought. I agreed that what I do is worth nothing, but what you do is worth the world. I agreed to let you wear my crown and then forget it was mine in the first place. I agreed that you were the creator, even as you destroyed my creations. I agreed that all I made was yours, and it was yours to keep from me. I rescind these agreements as of this moment, across all space and time, through every level of the universe, on every strand of DNA, in every permutation of me, in all the hiding spots of my being, in the past, present, and future, for now and evermore. I do not consent. Consent rescinded. Consent unmanufactured. Consent undone.